All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for attending. We have a great turnout. If you don't know me, I'm Nate Stone. I'm the president of the league. I've got an earpiece in my ear, which is making me feel really weird because I'm trying to record this so that if anyone missed, they can see this presentation at least. So Little League requires us every year to go through a safety meeting with all of the coaches. It's also very informative for the parents. We'll talk about the rules of the league. We'll talk about safety that's required by Little League. Everyone who's a head coach should have an ASAP plan. If you didn't get one and are checking in, we'll go through it on here and you can get one afterward. Each coach is required to have the ASAP plan on their person when they're at a game or a practice. Mainly because in the back of it, we have your medical release forms. If you're in player pitch, we have a bunch of medical release forms, and I'd like it if we can pass them out real quick at the end here because we just did the draft last night. If you're coach pitch or T-ball coach, we have a few medical release forms, but we don't get many of those because we don't have many events during the spring. So you'll have to get your players to fill those out or your parents to fill those out at your first practice or your first game, preferably as soon as possible. And those medical release forms are important for a couple reasons. The main one is that it informs you of anything that your player might have, an allergy, specific medical condition, things that you need to know about on the field. And if there is a specific condition like that, please talk to the parent, find out what is appropriate, how you deal with it. That's a critical thing. And then the second thing, therefore, is if a child does have an injury where they're required, an ambulance pickup is required, we hand that to the ambulance, to the paramedic, so they can know if there's any conditions and so forth. And also just not knowing that there are no conditions lets them treat more quickly as well. You know, if it says no conditions, they can go faster. So that's what that for. You're supposed to rip it out, hand it to them, and let them take over and do the treatment. We haven't had an ambulance injury in all the time I've known here, and that's great, and I hope that continues. But if it does, we want to be prepared for it. So that's what that's for. I wanted to start by saying this again. I'm going to advertise it all the time because we have a great raffle going on. If you didn't see it at the parent meeting, we are raffling off a jersey from the 2007 World Series team. It's signed by 23 players. It's a great way to support our Green Monster raffle. Green Monster that we're putting up at Penny Field. There's a mock-up of it right over here. That's 1/4 scale. It'll be 80 feet long, about as long as this room, and 12 feet high once we're finished. Some of you volunteered to help out this weekend. We'll be sending out some more info about that. We're going to build it this weekend out at Penny. We've already started and made some progress on it already. If you do want to buy some tickets, you can just scan those codes there and it'll take you right to the site. So now I'll get right onto the safety plan. For those just coming in, I have safety plan booklets up here for your teams. You can get one now if you want. Actually, I don't have one for your team, Chase. I'm one short. I might have to put it together, a little self-assembly required. And we'll go right through it just kind of quickly. I hopefully can get through it in about 20 minutes. Then we'll move on to talking about the league rules and also and just coaching techniques for the different groups. We'll split out into a couple of groups at that point so we can have a T-ball and coach pitch session and a AA, AAA, and major session, and softball will do their own. So we're going through the safety manual. Melissa Belcher is our safety officer. She cannot attend until later tonight. She should be here a little later. But she redid the whole thing this year. It's much better organized and cleaner than it ever has been in the past. I'm not going to read our safety mission and expectations completely here, but it is our most primary concern. We want the kids to have fun, but the main thing is to keep them safe. You got to think of it as they're kind of little kids walking around with weapons. You know, they got a bat in their hand, they can hit somebody. And that's really the thing that is the most important thing to do in Little League is keep them safe. All parents, all coaches can help do that. If you don't have eyes in the back of your head, it's mostly about making sure when you tell someone to get a bat, tell them to get a helmet. They'll get a helmet and a bat every time. Don't just say, go get your bats. Go get your helmet and your bat. Or go get a helmet and a bat if they're borrowing from the league gear. That is probably the number one cause of concussions in the Little League is not getting hit by a ball or getting tackled. It's getting hit by a bat when someone's taking a practice swing. And boy, I'll tell you, it almost happens every year, no matter what team I do. I'm like, thank goodness, and let's separate them out, you know, but you got to keep an eye on it. That is the number one cause. And so I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit there, but the main thing is that safety is our goal and it takes all of us to watch for that. You've got to be watching all the time and ask your parents to help you out. If they see something going wrong, tell them you want them to come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, this doesn't look good. and you go, oh yeah, you're right, and fix it up. You know, that's the goal. We all need to be conscious of safety and making it our top priority. There's some requirements that we put in here. This is reviewed by Little League every year, and it's part of our insurance certification. We have to have this, and we have to pass it out. They have certain requirements that we list how to get to it on the web. We have it on our website. All of our pages this year where there's a link, you can now scan it with your phone, so you don't have to type it in if you use a QR code. So you'll be able to get to anything anytime. The safety officer, like I said, is Melissa Belcher. She's being assisted by Bobby Joe Doucette, who is doing the CPR clinic on Thursday. If you have any safety issues, like you see a field that doesn't look good, or you see equipment that isn't up to standard, let her know, and she'll reach out to the board and find the appropriate solution. Her number is right there on the screen. It's in your book. Call her up or text her. Let her know that you've got an issue. We'll get out there to fix it. Sometimes fences peel up. Get the ground crew out there to get the fence peeled back down. A lot of them have like barbs on the end if they're coming out of the ground. So things like that, if you see them, let us know. We don't have eyes everywhere all the time. We do go through and inspect all the fields as good as we can, and we have a huge amount of work going on this weekend across like 4 different fields, in addition to the field cleanup we did last week. But it does, like I said, the reason she's in here is to reach out so we can take care of any safety issues. Also, in the event of an actual injury, need to report it to Melissa. Any injury where the child sees a doctor or an emergency room, we have to make a record of that. And I'll talk about that briefly a little later on. Emergency numbers, they make us put these in, which I think is a little bit distracting. Almost all the time you're going to dial 911 if there's an emergency. We don't want you calling the police department directly. They ask us to put these in here as part of the plan, but I don't agree with that pretty much. Just call 911. They're going to route you to the right person. And they're going to know what is the right person once you tell them the event. So they'll get you to one of these if you need to. I'd rather rely on 911 to make that decision. That's my personal opinion. Little League requires us to put them in there. All of the league officers are also listed in here. Reach out at any time. Our goal is to make the best league we can. It's a lot of work, but it's also what we do, and we want to do the best job we can at it. And that's for sure our main goal is to be accessible and do anything we can to make sure the league goes well. All volunteers 16 and older must complete a volunteer application and pass a background check. So hopefully you've all done that through the website. We have not had anyone come back with a negative response, and that's great. And so hopefully we can get everyone through there. We have pretty good saturation of that so far. We've had at least 145 volunteers pass background checks already, which is pretty phenomenal. That is about 3 or 4 per team. So we're getting in good shape there. And definitely anyone you know who wants to step on the field, please encourage them to reach out really to info@gnglittleleague.org, the email, and Amanda will get you set up through the app to do that. Yes. No, high school umpires. No, they don't have to be part of our league. They don't have to pass a background check if they're under 18. If they are over 18, which some high schools can be, they do. Yep. They should fill out a volunteer form though, so we have their name and they can get on our insurance. But they can do the actual written one in that case if they want. Yep, and that's great. Love to have them. So, let's see. I already talked about the medical release form. There should be copies in the back of your packet there that are blank for the kids who haven't. There should, for levels that are above AAA and above, you actually have a checklist. The other ones you're going to have to wait till your roster gets published and check through to make sure you've got one for everyone on your roster once that roster gets published. Because we didn't have all the rosters done until today, but they're not in the system yet. They'll be in the system tomorrow or Thursday, hopefully. But please make sure you get everyone to get that medical release form in. I wanted to briefly mention the Diamond Leader program. This is a new program by Little League. It's a 20 to 30-minute online training program. I admit I have not taken it yet. I just found out about it at the board meeting, the district meeting last night. They said it's great. It really helps you be a better coach. You get a little certificate on it, which you can use to show that you've taken the training on coaching, and any training you take is great. I've taken many trainings over the years, and it doesn't matter how many I've gone to. Every time I learn something new. And I think it makes you a better coach to take any of these. The great thing about this one, it's online. You can do it anytime you want. If you are coaching an all-star team for our league, either as an assistant or a head coach, you will be required to take it. It must be done by June 1st. If it's not done by June 1st, it won't be in the little data center, and they will not let you coach on all-stars. And then it's as simple as that. They told us you won't be coaching. So when we get down to all-stars time, make sure you've done that if you're planning to apply to be one of the coaches. We're not going to do a whole lot of actual first aid training today. We're just going to talk about some of the rules of Little League. We do have the first aid session and CPR training on Thursday for those who can attend. We have 6 spots available still. If it fills up and people want to do more, we'll open up another sign-in seat, and Bobby Joel will do another one later as we approach the season. We've got 19 people attending so far, so that's great. I think it really improves the safety on the field to have more people certified, and you never know when you're going to need it. It's definitely a chance in your life to save a life sometime. We're also working on getting automated defibrillators at the 2 fields we own. They hope great. First one purchased yesterday, and we hope to have them out shortly in the next few weeks. So that's also covered in the training. There's a very small risk that kids can have an issue there, and that's why it's become a problem in a thing to do with Little League fields, but it's probably more likely going to save an adult out there someday. So I'm glad to have it for both cases. It really covers us, makes us more thorough in our safety on the field. You never know when it'll be needed. Allergies is probably the number one thing we do need to discuss. It is very important you know the allergies of the kids on your team. Kids are going to bring snacks into the dugout and things, depending on what your policy on it is as a coach. We don't have an official league rule about it. If you do allow snacks on your bench, you need to know from all your parents that what the rules are. Is anyone allergic to nuts? Is anyone allergic to anything that should limit the ability or the choice of snacks that can be had on the bench? Also, if there's severe allergies, make sure you've learned how to use an EpiPen. I learned it from Little League, and I've saved 2 people with EpiPens since then. So first time I ever had to learn it was for a kid, and within 6 months, had an adult who was having a reaction, ran around the stadium until I found someone with one and got him jabbed. So I'm glad I learned. That's all I'm saying. You never know when you might use it. So for bleeding wounds, it is important to take care of it immediately. It's basic standard practice in the Little League to immediately treat the wound with the first aid kit we have and stop the bleeding, and don't let them back on the field until we've achieved that. Also, make sure it's a minor enough wound that they can go back on the field. If it's the kind of thing where it needs to go get cleaned and stitched, probably not a good idea to let them finish the game. I always talk to parents whenever there's a wound like this immediately. If someone gets, somehow gets a slight cut or something, if it's not something that one Band-Aid will fix, talk to the parents, make sure they're okay with the player continuing. That's generally the rule across most of the first aid issues. If it's something you treat on the spot, talk to the kid, make sure they're good, make sure the parent's good with them going back out on the field. That's really the first line of defense, is the parent to say, no, I think I need to go take him to a doctor. Heat and cold related emergencies. Heat stroke is an important thing to take care of. Cold is an important thing. We have a wide variety of weather here in Maine. As a general rule, depending on the level, I kind of cut it off at certain temperatures. If it's T-ball and coach pitch, I really think like 50 degrees, is kind of the minimum. You could go 45 if you got a tough crew, but don't go out there below 45 degrees. They're not going to have any fun, and that's what we want them to do, is have fun. With AA, I usually say 45. AA, AAA, majors, I might go as low as 40 if it's not windy. But we don't usually play below about 40. Just because we want them to have fun, for one. It's everything stings if it's below 40, no matter what you're doing. In terms of heat related, it's very important to remind the kids to hydrate. They just don't think to do it. If you see someone slowing down, one of your players starting to slow down, ask them if they got a water bottle. And if they say no, find one. If they don't have one, or a parent's not nearby to get one, if we've got a snack shack open, just tell them you need one. The snack shack will give you one. So just help them keep hydrated. If they start to get signs that they're having trouble, definitely see if you can get a hold of that parent and take them out of the game for a while, and let the parent decide if they need to go home or they need to stop. I don't really want coaches making that decision. It's a parent's decision to decide if their player should play. Don't just suck it up and get a water in you. Make sure that the parents agree that that's something they should do. I'm just going to skip the communicable disease because it's just not super applicable. Concussions, though, is applicable, and this is an important one. There's a link here to Little League's page on it. This is where we think, this is the group we want to trust with deciding what we should look at. Little League and the CDC. I want to skip to the CDC one real quick here, which I have open. So make that view bigger. So these are the the two things to look out for, the list of concussion symptoms that the CD recommends you watch for. And, it is, a player will not know that they've had a concussion most of the time. The two times I've seen one in Little League, players have no idea. They're good to go. And they're going to say, I'm good to go, coach. And, two times I've had players get hit, and they've both been hit by past pitched balls that resulted in they were both catchers. So the ball just went untouched or foul tipped right into their mask. They staggered back. They kind of got up and they started to get ready to go for the next pitch. But they did it wobbly. And so I went over and talked to him and I said, how are you doing? Good. I'm like, well, what inning is it? I don't know. I think we just got here. They just don't have a good recollection of what's going on. And they were dazed or stunned. And I said, are you seeing stars? Yeah, I'm seeing stars. Let's go sit down. And both were out for 2 weeks after that. Both times it happened. So you got to keep a watch out. They're not going to know. They're just going to go right back to what they're doing because that's every kid is tough, So these are the things to ask for. You really want to ask, where they are. If they are slow to respond, like I think I'm at a baseball game. That's one I've had once too. I think I'm at a baseball game. Yeah, you are. We're going to go sit over here for a little while. And they actually left and went to the emergency room immediately. But he was fine. Did have a concussion though. So it's important to do that so that you don't aggravate the problem. I'd much rather have them sitting on the sideline for a game. They go see a doctor or the parent decides they're totally fine. They don't see a doctor. I also recommend whenever you've said, hey, I want to pull them out of the game because I think I got a concussion, send the parents to go to this site so they can get some of those symptoms and learn what to watch for. If a kid gets really sleepy that night early, that's a bad sign. That means they're having concussion symptoms and they need to be seen. So there's all kinds of things about how to recognize a concussion, what to watch for post-concussion, to know what kind of level of effort to take to alleviate the symptoms and make sure the kid's going to be okay. So these have happened multiple times in my career Little League, so I definitely think everyone should spend some time to read through those and see what the best way to deal with them are. We have another summary in here that's basically taken right from that. And there's an app now from the CDC, which lets you run through a concussion protocol with the kid right on site. And so it's recommended to install that. It's in your book. You can also see this link after and I'll show it, or you can find it on the web. It's just another way to do concussions. And baseball doesn't have a ton of concussions, but it has probably more than people think. And so it's important to keep an eye out for it, both baseball and softball. That ball moves quick. The bats move quick. They can cause it. I'm going to skip the concussion in sports diagram because we kind of went through it a little bit. Every field has a first aid kit, so we don't issue them to coaches directly. We keep them stocked at the fields. Most of our fields have a set of bins with all the equipment you'll need and a first aid kit in it. We're going to try to work on having more people go and check those first aid kits more often this year. So Bobby Joe's going to help out with that and Melissa's going to help out with that. But another thing is if you use up some stuff in there, it'd be great if you can call Melissa and let her know what field things are out of so she can just run out there right away and get it stocked back up. And we have the little crying bags, ice packs, and we try to keep them stocked. But like I said, if they're running low, just let us know. We'll get back out there and get them filled up. We also have travel bags. Softball actually gets everything issued. But we have travel bags for different levels that travel to other towns. Those will have a first aid kit in it as well. I already mentioned field conditions a little bit. Again, please let us know if you've seen anything. And field game prep, it's important to check the field for rocks. Kids go out there and play between, you never know what you'll find in the field. Just take a quick walk around it, look for anything you think can cause a problem. If the field hasn't been dragged and it's got big footprints in it because it was muddy and someone was running on it, you need to get out there with a rake and rake those out, try to make the field something the kids want to play on. And this is a point, where I really don't want the coaches to do this. I mean, I want them to check the field. I do think the head coach should do that and be responsible for making sure the field is safe to play on. But I really want coaches to use the team helpers, use their grounds crew that's on their team. There are many, many people who volunteered for the league as part of our not wanting to pay the non-volunteer fee. We ask that they volunteer. And we're like, for all the levels that have come out in the app already, we list right on the team who your volunteers are and what their role is. So please find out who they are when you start your team and ask them. I say, when we get to the game, I want that infield raked and lines out there, and I'll show you how to do it. And that's what I do every year. I get a few people that I want to do the lines. We sit down at home plate. I show them how to do the lines, and then I never do it again. I want to coach my team, get them ready for the game. And parents love doing it. Once they've been trained on it, it's an easy thing to do, and it makes the field look great, and it makes it feel so much more professional for your team. Another point to that is if we're running out of materials at a place, please let us know as well. You can always text me or just send an email to info@gnglittleleague.org. It's hard to keep track of all the stock across all the different fields we have. So if we're low somewhere, we need to know so we can get it out there. All right. In equipment inspection requirements, there's a bat guide here that you're supposed to be able to run up and down a bat. I would say I honestly don't check the bats too often during the year. I do, ask the kids to tell me if they think they bent their bat, let me see it. And so I'll say that to the kids a couple times in the beginning of the year. We do check them in the playoffs. If your bat is dinged in the playoffs, the umps won't let you go. Some of our umps check every week. And I think that's great. So at the higher levels, when you've got an umpire, they're going to do it all the time. The main thing is to keep the bats safe. These metal bats and composite bats can break. They can get little sharp edges on them. They can get dents, make the ball fly weirdly. They can cut a baseball or a softball. So every once in a while, you do want to go check that someone hasn't wrecked their bat and that it's safe to play with. All of the bats do need to be Little League approved. USSA bats, USSSA bats are not approved for Little League. They're like cannons, and they're not allowed. So please be sure your kids aren't using the USSSA bats in Little League. Let's see. There's a video on bat inspection and a video on catcher's gear inspection. We haven't really had any problems with it, but there are fancy catcher's helmets out there like the pros wear that just have a cap that goes on your head and no ear cover. I've had a couple of kids bring those to games, but you're not allowed to use those in the league. Your catcher's gear must have an ear cover over both ears. So you need the full helmet catcher's gear if you buy your own. The skull cap ones are really cool looking, but they're not allowed. So if you do have kids bringing their own catcher's gear, make sure it complies. It also has to have a throat dangle, which dangles down below, even if it's the hockey style mask. That's a Little League rule. And it's very uncommon to get under the hockey style mask, but it happens enough that Little League requires the dangle even on that. I believe softball is required to have the dangle too. I'll have to double check though. And no, you can't. You have to have the ear thing if you're wearing that. I don't know. I think it's required for both. It might be just Little League saying it's required for both, because sometimes that's just how they do the rules. So manager parent meeting. I think this is a highly valuable thing to talk about for a minute. Usually not at my first practice because I want to get that one going, but usually my second practice, when I've got an assistant coach established who can start the practice up and lead them through the stretching and so forth, I like to have a meeting with all the parents and tell them about expectations. We'll talk about it a little bit more at the different levels, but if you set expectations for what you want your kids to do and with the parents and then also with the players, and I usually do it in separate sessions so I can talk a little differently to the parents, you'll have better success. So telling about the expectations, especially that our umpires are volunteers. I'm really hoping to have a lot of high school umpires this year from the baseball side. Both my sons took umpiring classes this year. I very, very personally don't want them getting yelled at out there. They're great kids and they are great little umpires, but they're going to make mistakes because they're 13 and 16. There are our other umpires who've been umpiring for 40 years. They're going to make mistakes because we usually only have one umpire per field. If I've got a run coming in, I've got to look at home plate to make sure they touch that plate. Okay. If I'm looking at home plate and there's a play at second, I'm not going to see it because I'm the only umpire on the field. Okay. So if you say he was safe and the other team says he was out, the umpire is going to go safe because he didn't see it. And that's as simple as that. There's no replays. It's over. So when you think about the umpire, everyone, you're going to always have guys like, oh, and I immediately go, well, you couldn't have seen that, you know. But sometimes I'll protest. If we have two umpires, you can, but you have to do it nicely. You know, walk out to the, you call time, and you can walk out to the umpire who made the call. The policy is you talk to the umpire who made the call and say, you know, what'd you see there? You don't start with, you were wrong on that, because he's going to say, no, I wasn't. And the next thing is he's going to throw you out. But you say, what'd you see there? He said, well, I had him on the bag. I said, well, I thought the player was off the bag. Do you think you could get a second opinion on that? And he'll go, yeah, sure. And he'll go ask the other guy. If the other guy saw it, you're going to get the call. If the other guy didn't, you're not. But you've got to take it with some tact. If you've got the umpire mad, boy, is he going to let you have it. I've seen guys called out at Wyndham. When our guy slid in, he was 3 feet off the bag when he was tagged. The umpire called him safe because the other coach from Wyndham had got the umpire so mad that he wasn't going to let and there were no plays going Wyndham's way that day. It was really hilarious. So keep the umpire on your side, and you do that by being nice to them and respecting the fact that it's a hard job. And then also to your parents, keep them on your side. Make sure they're understanding that you're not going to protest every call because you know it, and that they also need to use proper language, and they need to understand this is a game for kids and it's for fun, and it's to teach them baseball and softball, make them love the game. And the parents who have to nearly get thrown out of games don't make their kids love the game, is my general feeling on it. So we have some guidelines that at the back of the document that were established before. I honestly haven't reviewed them recently, but there are some good points in there about how parents should behave. I would probably translate it from that, or you can make your players and parents sign the actual code of conduct if you like. We don't have a rule requiring that, because I want coaches to establish their own policy for their team. So I'm running a little bit late here. Just quick tips. Most coaches have moved to dynamic warm up as opposed to stretching first. So dynamic warm up means running, doing movement based stretches to get the muscles and blood flowing before you do actual stretches. That's most every coaching clinic I've taken recently has gone that route. Start with a run around the field to get the blood flowing, then move into dynamic stretching, and then any static stretches you do if you want to stretch beyond that. These kids are usually really flexible and don't have much problem anyway, but it's always good to establish what they'll want to do as they get older, and establish a good policy for it. The most important rule I have yet to cover is lightning. It's very important to protect from lightning. I always thought this was kind of not true, that it was important, but then I went and looked it up, and if you look online, Little League has had numerous incidents where people have been injured or even killed on the field over the last 30 years. So it's not an old thing either. It's important to know that lightning can strike anywhere within actually 30 miles of the previous strike. If you see it, you really do need to clear the field. I mean, so if you hear it, you have to clear the field. By Little League rules, you have to stay off the field for 30 minutes. If you hear it again, you have to stay off the field for 30 more minutes. If you're in a coach pitch game or a T-ball game and you hear thunder and lightning, just call it. You know, you're not going to want the kids hanging out there for 30 more minutes. If you've got lightning that you can see, it's probably also time to call the game. You are allowed to wait in the car if it's not striking nearby. The kids must be in vehicles, though. They can't be just hanging out on the field, because cars are good insulators. Generally, you'll work with the other coach to decide if you're going to resume the game or not, but you do have to wait till you haven't heard anything for 30 minutes. So in our league, we generally, if we have a problem where there's an actual storm, we usually just call the game. You know, I think last year in the playoffs for majors, we had a big storm in the middle of one of the games. We waited 30 minutes, the storm got worse. We postponed and continued the next day. Not a big deal. Most games that aren't playoffs, you'll just call it and see them next time you see them. That's very important. Make sure you protect people from lightning. It really can get you. I'm going to skip the concession stand procedures. If you do have Snack Shack volunteers and are running them, we're going to send these out via email as well. We do ask that the home team run the Snack Shack whenever you're the home team at a field that has a Snack Shack. We'll have them stocked up this year. I'm looking for volunteers to help out. Becky Longfellow volunteered to kind of run the operation, but we need a few more people to help with assigning and training and also stocking. So if you have an interest in that, please reach out, or if you know anyone who does. We're going to try to run I believe 3 or 4 snack shacks this year. So we'll definitely need volunteers to help out with that. Little League still has the rule that only the batter can have a bat. There's no on-deck batter. This applies during games. During practices, you might have 3 players with a bat if you've got a parent there to manage that and have 3 tees set up far enough apart where they won't hit each other. But during a game, only one player can have a bat, and that's the batter who is batting. You can't warm up with a bat. You can't hold a bat. If you're at a level that has an umpire, Mark is famous for only one player can have the bat. And he will say that 40 times a game. And that's the Little League rule. It's important that we stick to that. And it's just a safety thing in case, you know, you're warming up on deck and the other team throws a ball nearby and comes to pick it up and gets whacked. That's basically what it's for. Catchers must wear a cup, at least on the boys' side. And that's very important, especially at the higher levels. I'd like you to train them from day one, as you know, that they, especially at AA, is where catchers should start wearing a cup for sure. They're getting balls pitched to them by pitchers who are very inaccurate. They need to have a cup to catch there. I prefer it if they wear a cup really from day one. Coach pitch T-ball, if you can get them to do it, that'd be great because it's just part of the uniform. They need to know that they need to put it on and wear the cup. All right, so there's some cool things. I have some rule books if anyone wants a physical one. I didn't get too many copies because they just don't give them to us anymore. Because they have the rule book app now on the App Store for both Android and iOS. It's great to have. It's important for the lightning rule. That's probably the rule you use most, is just to look up how are we supposed to deal with lightning. And there's also, for majors baseball, you play by the actual Little League rules. And so that one, you'll have them in there. The last major thing I want to cover is pitching. For baseball side, it doesn't apply to softball yet. I think someday they'll change that. But it is much easier to throw underhand on the shoulder than it is on the baseball side. The elbow and shoulder take much more torque. It is incredibly important that you follow these rules. And as an opposing manager in the playoffs, keep track of the other team. It is a huge advantage when you're in the middle of the inning and say your pitcher's at his limit. You need to pull him. But boy, that's going to ruffle the feathers on that other team. I'm pretty competitive. I've had to do that. I've also been scoring a game from the clubhouse and had to run down on the field and pull the team's pitcher because he was over the limit. So we enforce it very, very strongly. From personal experience, it is pretty effective, these limits. If you go beyond them, your kid's arm will hurt. My kid's arm hurt when I was a little lax about it a couple of times running a travel team and a baseball team. And we stopped doing that, and he has no problem pitching now. And so it's very important to follow these rules. They're very well defined, and they're part of the game. So it's a strategic advantage to know them too. And if you blow it in the All-Stars, it's going to cost you because you'll end up with a pitcher not being able to pitch because the All-Stars, they track it separately. Also, admittedly, though, sometimes they'll blow it. We definitely lost a pitcher once because the scorer got it wrong. And we had asked before the inning which pitch count was and had 2 people tracking it. And they had one more than us, which put us over the limit. So we couldn't use the pitcher in the next game, which was a bummer. But sometimes they get it wrong. So anyway, on the pitching, just to clarify what rest means, a day of rest means if I pitch today and I take one day of rest, I cannot pitch tomorrow. Tomorrow is completely off. That's one day of rest. The day after, they can pitch again. So 4 days rest means if you pitch on Sunday, well, on Saturday, let's say, you can't pitch Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. The next day you could pitch would be Thursday, if you've hit your maximum. And so it's important to plan for that so you have enough pitchers too. And in this league, you'll see when we go through the coaching rules, I encourage everyone to pitch, so you should always have somebody that can go in there and pitch. I really think any kid can do it for an inning. If they give up 4 runs, they'll decide they want to work harder and become a pitcher, or they decide they don't and they won't. You know, it's pretty much as simple as that. Accident reporting, like I said, if you do have an accident that requires an injury to see a doctor or a paramedic or anything, there are forms that you can download via these links. They must be filled out by the coach. We want the coach's opinion of what happened. Our safety officer will have the parents also fill one out. And it's just so the insurance companies have something to deal with. Even if you're saying I would never sue, what really happens though is your insurance company will sue. Your healthcare provider will say, you got injured at a baseball game. We don't want to pay for it. We're going to sue your insurance and we're going to get them to pay for it. So even though everyone says I would never sue Little League, you're not going to do it. Your healthcare company is going to do it, and they're going to do it every time. Okay, so if you see a doctor and you said it would happen at Little League, we're going to get a call about it and have to put those forms out. I guarantee you it happens every year. So it's not a personal thing. It's just business. That's how business is done. So please make sure you fill those out if there's any injury that requires medical treatment. All right. And that wraps up the ASAP plan. If you are a head coach and didn't get one, please see me after. We need to make sure every team has them on site. And if you came in late, I'm going to say that one more time. These are meant to be on site with you at all practices and games, home or away, travel or whatever. The medical release forms need to be filled in for all of your players. And they are so you know what your players' issues are, allergies and so forth, and also so that you can tear them out and give them to a paramedic so the paramedic can treat quickly and accurately if there is an injury that requires a paramedic or on-site treatment. All right. Whew. Thank you for bearing with me through that. I have to do that every year, probably my 10th time. And I do think it's important, though, and I think it's very important that we all hear it and the changes. So one major rule change I want to go through before we do talking about the different levels, because I believe the agenda said we're breaking into groups next. Is that right? Yeah. There's a major rule change in Little League this year, which I think is very positive, also a little dangerous. I've mentioned it if you were in the meetings and there during tryouts. But this year, at levels where there is a pitcher, which is really AA and up, parents and volunteers can now warm up the pitcher. In the past, you were not allowed to do that. It's a little bit risky. We've actually had the reason you weren't allowed to warm up the pitcher is because parents can throw harder than kids, and it's tempting to want to wing it back to your kid, which you do because you know he can catch it, and then you hit your own kid in the jaw and break it, which has happened in our league. So that's why they don't allow you to do it in the past. They're allowing it now because it's really hard on the pace of play to wait for the catcher to get all geared up and then come out there and start doing the warm-up. So if you want to catch for your player, I'm all for it, but there's 2 tips. The main one is make sure your player is looking when you throw the ball back, okay? They get distracted so easily. Make eye contact, make sure he's looking right at you when you throw, he or she, and throw that ball back. At the player pitch level, I would prefer it if you do not throw it back to the players. At the player pitch level, you're always going to have a coach standing next to the pitcher anyway. Throw it back to the pitcher. You can still warm up that player pitch player, but throw it back to the pitcher's assistant, the coach who's going to be doing the pitching anyway, so that we don't have to worry about hitting those kids because they get distracted very easily. So it's a new change. It's very important. If you're a male person catching for a majors pitcher, they can throw 65 miles an hour, some of them. I don't usually wear a cup to the game, so take precautions. You can go a little sideways to the thing, to the player. The other thing to do is to move up to the plate. If you are behind the plate, they often bounce off the plate and come into zones that you don't want them in. If you're in front of the plate, you have much more, or standing on the plate, you have much less likely chance it's going to bounce up and get you. So do take precautions there. It's easier to get hit than you think. Especially because they don't hit your glove very often yet. Even majors they do pretty good, but so now I'd like to break into groups. Did you want to do an overall talk at all, or just want to go straight to groups? Why don't you do like 5 minutes and then we'll break into groups. All right. So Nolan's our coaching coordinator. He'll probably give a little overall talk and then we'll break into groups. And the groups will go through the rules of each level because our rules are decided on by the board over the last, 50 years probably. There are modifications called local rules of Little League rules. Our goal with all these rules is to make the game accessible and fun for the kids. If you play, one thing people say, whenever you play real baseball, I get this a lot, and it's you never play real baseball in Little League because even Majors Little League is not the same rules as Major League Baseball. You can't lead off in Majors Little League. In juniors little league, you play pretty much by the rules of actual Major League Baseball, but that's 13, not age 13 and up. So the traditional little league, you never play by the rules. And it is all geared to make it so it's accessible to the kids so they can learn and develop and have success without getting bogged down in the minutia of the actual game, which is it's a complex game, probably the most complex sport you can play. All right, Nolan, I'll let you take over.